of Rouen, you might have talked with soldiers or seen across Canada in the New World. Did live in Rouen at this time, probably heard stories of the New World. His name was Robert, perhaps from one of his Jesuit teachers. The priest might have read to him about Canada, or New France, as it was also called. And perhaps the boy thought that someday he might see this land, the land that was far from Rouen, across the sea in the New World, Canada. Eventually, the boy did get to see the untamed wilderness of Canada. For the boy of Rouen grew up to be Robert de La Salle, one of the great explorers of North America. The story of the land called New France in America is a story of brave explorers and colonizers. La Salle added the vast lands of Louisiana to New France. But for 150 years before La Salle, there were other daring men: Barrett Sano, Cartier, Champlain, Marquette, and Joliet. It is Barrett Sano who begins the story of France in the New World. He was a sea captain who made a voyage for the King of France in 1524. He sailed westward. He searched the coast, trying to find a passage through this land, because he thought Asia lay just beyond. He found no passage. 10 years later, a Frenchman named Jacques Cartier tried again to find a passage to Asia. Cartier discovered the Gulf he named the St. Lawrence, and finally the great river itself. This Gulf and river became for the French the great gateway into America. Cartier was impressed by the great St. Lawrence. It was broad. It seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. It seemed to Cartier that this must indeed be the passage to Asia. Along the river, Cartier found Indian villages. The Indians had no gold, such as the Spaniards had found in Mexico. But they did have pelts, valuable furs. To the French, the Indians offered the furs in exchange for articles they wanted from the French explorers, such things as steel nuts and beads and other ornaments. So began the trading between the French and Indians. But not much trade developed, because France at this time was involved in a long civil war at home. Among the soldiers was a young man who later became interested in exploration. His name was Samuel de Champlain. Champlain left France and explored what is now Nova Scotia, New England, the St. Lawrence, and Upper Great Lakes. He also founded Port Royal, the first permanent French settlement. This is Port Royal, a fort and trading post. The French called it a habitation. To such forts came the soldier explorers of France. These men and others who followed them used the forts as supply bases from which they pushed out into the wilderness. The early French explorers learned much from the Indians and began to follow their ways of living. From the Indians, they learned to use light canoes, to travel quickly and quietly by water as they trapped and traveled through the forests. These Frenchmen were the voyageurs, the bold, hardy voyagers or travelers who penetrated the deep forests of Canada. They found plenty of wild animals, some that would supply food, and some, like the beaver, that would be a source of valuable furs. At the same time, the voyageurs explored ever deeper into the rich new land. Champlain still thought the great St. Lawrence might be the water route to Asia. He believed the St. Lawrence might be one of a network of water leading through the continent. And it was possible to move along one waterway, and by portaging, or carry canoe in Indian fashion, to walk across the land and eventually continue on another waterway. On the Great St. Lawrence, Champlain founded the city of Quebec in 1608. 12 years before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth. Quebec was a trading post in the region to which the name New France had been given. The settlement of Quebec became an important trading center. From the villages of the Indians, the voyageurs brought in their furs. To make sure this valuable trade would continue, Champlain encouraged friendship with the Indians. Many of his men lived with the Algonquin tribes. Champlain's example began a long, close alliance between the French and their Indian neighbors. French missionaries also helped win the friendship of the Indians, and they converted many to Christianity. And so the voyageurs, along with the missionaries, continued to explore the land. West across the Great Lakes, north to Hudson Bay, southwest into the Illinois country. Father Marquette, a Jesuit missionary, and Louis Joliet, a voyageur, explored the Mississippi River in 1673. They voyaged through Lake Michigan and down the Fox River. They portaged over to the Wisconsin River and down the Mississippi. They had never seen so large a river. Like the St. Lawrence, this Mississippi was obviously a key waterway. Now the French had extended their route that led deep into the vast continent. But the mouth of the Mississippi had not been found. Now came another Frenchman, La Salle, trying to complete Marquette's exploration. La Salle was determined to travel the route of Marquette and Joliet down the great river to find the mouth of the Mississippi. Setting out from a fort on Lake Ontario, La Salle finally reached the mouth of the Mississippi on April 9, 1682. La Salle claimed the river, all its tributaries, and all land drained by them for France. He named the land Louisiana after his king, Louis XIV. La Salle wanted to be governor of the vast Louisiana he claimed. So he returned to France, to Versailles Palace. Here he told King Louis of his ambitious dreams for a French empire in America. France now held two entrances to the heart of the North American continent. They were linked by easy travel over waterways and portages. But the English were pressing westward now. And there were Spanish claims in the south. France, said La Salle, could dominate the whole continent by making Louisiana a kind of wedge to push back her rivals. To do this, La Salle dreamed of more settlers, people coming in ever-increasing numbers to settle on the farms and in the growing towns of New France. La Salle dreamed of boats on the waterways to carry on trade, good roads connecting these waterways, and at key places, a chain of forts to protect this new French empire in America. These were among the hopes that Governor La Salle carried with him as he left Versailles to return to America. But his hopes were short-lived. La Salle was killed on his expedition to the Louisiana country. Yet his dream of thriving settlements in New France did not die. Today, lands once part of New France have developed far beyond La Salle's fondest hopes. Heavy traffic moves along routes that were once woodland trails. Ships sail the waterways where once voyageurs paddled their canoes. And in some key places where portages were made, great cities now stand. These are some of the lasting results of French explorations in America. Explorations made by daring men who founded a new France in the New World.